Over at the New York Times yesterday, the Jerusalem-based reporter Isabel Kirshner wrote about the horrors of the past 2 weeks in Israel. I'll get back to Jim Jordan in just a second. And the worries that the Israelis have about this ongoing war with Hamas. And in the third paragraph in this article in yesterday's New York Times, she writes, all this is happening, this war and everything, amid a total breakdown of trust between the citizens and the state of Israel, and a collapse of everything Israelis believed in and relied on. Now, what she's talking about here is Netanyahu. She then quotes a Tel Aviv author, Dora Rabinian, who says, we have woken to a terrible sobriety about whose hands we put our fate in. We thought we had military superiority, but there's a feeling that someone up there forgot why he is there. He's speaking of Netanyahu, of course. In fact, she goes on to say, Mr. Netanyahu's refusal so far to openly accept any responsibility for the October 7th disaster is, in her opinion, one of the great frustrations of Israeli citizens. We had a real similar experience here in the United States. Back in August of 2001, George W. Bush, well, first of all, in July of 2001, George Bush went to a G8 meeting in Italy, and he had to be moved from his hotel, and the Italians put up an anti-aircraft battery because there was a credible report that Osama bin Laden, his people were going to hijack passenger planes, a passenger aircraft, and fly it into the building where the G8 meeting was being held, where George Bush was. And so Bush had to be evacuated, and the Italians came out with their surface-to-air missiles, and Connie Rice was there. She was very aware of this. Weirdly, 3 months later, she said, no one could have expected that they would try to hijack planes. Well, then on August 6th, that was in either June or July of 2001, and on August 6th, the CIA brought a memo all the way down to Crawford, Texas, to give to George Bush personally that said, did I call him Donald Trump earlier? I don't think so. Anyway, that said, bin Laden determined to strike inside the U.S. Now, this is just a month after, a little more than a month, a few weeks after George Bush had to go through this whole song and dance in Italy because bin Laden was going to fly passenger planes into the hotel in Italy. So you would think, if you were George Bush and the CIA came to you and said, yep, he's going to strike inside the United States, probably in the next month or two, you would probably be inclined to at least call the TSA and say, hey, look out for Saudi citizens who are trying to get through airport security. He might call the FBI and say, hey, has anybody been taking flying lessons in the United States? He might call the CIA and say, what do you know about this? And what can you tell the FBI? But no, George Bush didn't do any of that. What George Bush did was essentially the same thing that Netanyahu did when the Egyptians told him that there was going to be an attack from Hamas. He ignored it. Bush ignored it. In fact, he went on the longest vacation in the history of the presidency all the way back to George Washington. No president, no American president has ever gone on vacation for that long. Because he didn't want to go back to D.C. because he knew D.C. was going to be hit by bin Laden, in my opinion. Instead, he went to Florida where his brother was governor. His brother declared a state of emergency on August 24th. And Bush just stayed there August 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, September 1, September 2, September 3, September 4, September 5. Bush is still down there having his vacation, hoping that, bin Laden doesn't strike. But if he does, he doesn't want to be anywhere near D.C. September 7th, September 8th, September 9th, and then boom. September 11th. It comes down while Bush is reading My Pet Goat to a class of second graders, 7-year-olds. Bush actually was trying to do things during that time. He was trying to get a $1 trillion tax cut passed, and Cheney was having secret meetings drawing up maps of the oil fields of Iraq in case he could come up with an excuse to attack Iraq. Neither of them were doing anything to stop the attack on the United States. Similarly, Donald Trump was warned by China and his own scientists in December of 2019 and again in January of 2020 how deadly and contagious COVID was. He completely ignored it. Well, he told Bob Woodward about it. And he got a little careful about who came into the White House. But by and large, he completely ignored it. At least until, they were stacking people in refrigerated trucks, bodies in refrigerated trucks in Connecticut and New York. And then on April 7th, the New York Times ran a front page headline saying mostly black people are dying. And that was the week that Donald Trump said, hey, let's put everybody back to work, especially those essential workers, those frontline people, mostly black and Hispanic, or large percentages of them, the people who work in the grocery stores, the people who drive the buses, let's put them all back to work. And as a result, America had 500 to 700,000 unnecessary COVID deaths because Donald Trump screwed this thing up so badly. So here you have three right-wing governments completely failing their people when they were warned in advance. Bush, Netanyahu, and Trump, all three of them. Why is this? I would argue to you that the reason why is because right-wing governments are not interested in the welfare of the people. They're interested in the welfare of the billionaire class that supports them and the big corporations that support them, and that's it. They're not interested in the people. I mean, when Democrats govern, Franklin Roosevelt famously said, better the occasional faults of a government that lives in a spirit of charity than the consistent emissions of government frozen in the ice of its own indifference. Democrats took that to heart. That was in 1933. And ever since then, Democrats have been trying to do the right thing for the American people. Republicans? No. They're trying to gut everything that the Democrats did. They tried to gut union rights. They tried to gut voting rights. They tried to make it easier for fossil fuel companies to pollute. They tried to make it easier for timber companies to clear cut. Remember the Healthy Forest Initiative from George Bush? They dial back people's access to welfare and health care programs. And of course, conservative governments, Republicans start wars. Grenada, Iraq, Kuwait, Afghanistan, Iraq. And they pass tax cuts for billionaires. This is why right-wing governments always fail their people. Pass it on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And it's why we want to see, left-wing governments elected. And by the way, Poland just did that. Spain has done that. Brazil has done that. It's spreading.